Hey everybody, this is Stu Smith along with Wes Kennedy. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is getting yourself through the training. And what does that exactly mean? And Wes Kennedy is a former Canadian Special Forces operator, and we're going to talk a little bit about the level of fitness that is required on that level, as well as the Navy SEAL side, as well as other special operations programs or challenging selection programs, because in the end, that's kind of what the whole program that Wes and I are involved with. We help people get to the training by passing a fitness test and preparing themselves for that level, but the journey is not over just because you can pass a fitness test. Now you got to focus on getting through the training. And this is, like I said, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about with other people in the business. Wes has a great website. I'll let him introduce himself as well as tell a little bit about where you can find him.
Hey Stu, super happy to be on the show with you, brother. We had a great first episode, so looking forward to part two of this three-part series. And anybody watching this, they can head over to brotherhoodlife.com to find out a little bit more about me and what I do. But I won't talk too much about that. Let's just dive into the content and give some people some tools and some value they can take into their training.
Sure, Wes. You're my guest here today, so let's talk about your side of the coin. You know, this is all a big team that we work with, as you know, not only with our own branches of the military, but joint and combined operations with other countries as well. So, what tell us about the Canadian Special Forces, and you always have to start off with the longest sniper shot in history.
Yeah, right. So, for your audience that hasn't heard about that, pretty cool news. Canadians shattered the previous record for the longest sniper kill in history at just over 34. I think it's 3,450 meters, which is about a kilometer shy, past almost a kilometer past the previous record held by I believe a British sniper. And yeah, it's I think death is never something to really celebrate, but I can celebrate somebody as a sniper myself. I can celebrate somebody who's taken years to master their craft, because it's no small feat to put a bullet down range at that distance with any sort of accuracy at all. So that's great. It's cool.
Absolutely,
Goes
absolutely.
to show how far training in US, in Canada, and in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and all those countries, how far it's come in the past 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Great to see.
So tell us about yourself, your history, and maybe even perhaps your journey that took you to where you found yourself wanting to be in the Canadian Special Forces, and what you had to do to prepare yourself.
Great question. I don't have a really motivational story about how I got in the military at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat,
Sure.
is didn't know what else to do. 18 and a half, maybe 19 when I joined, I think. And I didn't know what the world was about. I didn't know what options were out there. I didn't know what it would have been like to go to school. I didn't know what it was going to be like to join the military. I didn't know what it would have been like if I just stayed and worked on the oil rigs out in Alberta, which is what I was doing. Thank God I didn't. And I said yes. I said yes to the adventure that was becoming a combat engineer in the Canadian Forces. And thank goodness I did, because it was a very pivotal point in my life that sent me on an 8-year journey that took me twice to Afghanistan, through combat engineer training, through special forces training, sniper training, and more. And I like to say that it was joining the military and joining the special forces were two of my best 3 decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What year was that?
The year that I got in was 2005, and the year I got out was 2013.
Okay.
Special forces about 3 years in 2009.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, let's, what was your athletic history and how did you have to train to work around, you know, obviously you got in the military, you were part of the military. Now you're going to say, I got to go special forces selection. What did you have to do to change your training to prepare you better for that?
Great question. So I have a bit of a unique story in that I wasn't particularly physically fit when I was getting into the military. I had to train quite a bit just to reach the minimum standard. One of the interesting things I noticed is that because I hadn't really pushed my body very hard before I was, 17, 18, once I got to basic training, I wasn't the fittest guy there, but because I had so much capacity to just go 100%, I managed to actually get top athlete in basic training. But after that, like things started to add up. I would just train hard. I would follow, a free online workout. I would jump from workout to workout, just whatever felt good, whatever my buddies were doing in the gym. And eventually, I started following a popular online training plan, a free training plan. So it wasn't tailored to my specific needs or the specific needs of the selection I was about to do. But it did make me train hard. It made me put in a lot of time in the gym. And it felt good for a while. And then eventually I went to the gym one day and hit a wall. Like
Hmm.
literally did my first box jump of the workout and something was completely wrong. And I said, okay, that's weird. And did another box jump and something was still wrong. Like my body just did not want to do the workout. And at that point, I'd been checking out some pros in the industry that provided online fitness, and I talked to a few friends that were using programs like that, and I was convinced at that point, just with how I felt in my body with that crash, and with what they were experiencing with steady results, no plateauing, good energy, good libido, and seeing their performance markers improve, I knew there had to be a better way to do it. And so I think that was about 8 years ago now that I
Okay.
went and sought my own coach. And then I just kept diving down that rabbit hole. Like first I wanted to learn how to recover myself and get fitter. And then eventually my curiosity took over and that's where I am today is providing that same service now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So what would you say your wall was? Would that be you personally hitting an overtraining zone? And was this while you were preparing for SF or was it after, during,
Yeah,
later in SF?
there's a couple times, but as I was training for SF, I definitely felt that. I definitely felt that overseas, trying to both do my job overseas um, as well as trying to go to the gym every day in the hot, heated tents in Afghanistan. And my thinking was just, do more work. Do more work is going to be better than not than
Right.
rest, not doing anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good lesson to learn, especially while you're young before you really break yourself.
Yeah.
Very similar to my story. I was I was a powerlifting football player, 5 sports in high school. I mean, worked hard during the summers, on a like 12, 14-hour day job, pitching watermelons down in Florida in the heat. So I was used to work, so I think that does help, so probably your ability to work in those oil wells, those oil rigs for long days, that's, I tell people all the time, don't work out with me for 2 hours and then go take a 2-hour nap and then go work out again and take another nap, I mean, unless you really need it, I mean, there are times when you obviously need to rest, but some of the best results I've ever seen are guys who come to work out first thing in the morning and then work all day and able to put it together and maybe get some nice easy cardio on the back end of the day and just start that cycle over again. And yeah, you're going to need a rest day somewhere in there. And it might be middle of the week. I have found especially as I'm aging, is that I throw in this Wednesday or Thursday, middle of the week, day 3, day 4, mobility day. And I've been doing it for the last 5 years, and it saved me, from feeling that wall that you're talking about, that just that overtraining, and just you feel like everything's not working. It's probably working. You just work too hard, and had you taken a few rest days in there, you probably would have alleviated that hit. And I've felt it for the last 5 years, being able to not have that overwhelming sense of I'm overtraining and I'm worn out, and what I do is I get on the elliptical for 5 minutes. I foam roll for 5 minutes. I get on the elliptical for 5 minutes. I stretch for 5 minutes. I do that like for 50 minutes, back to back, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And then I go to the pool and do the same thing. I tread water for 5 minutes, stretch, do all the dynamic stretches that we normally do before workout. I do it in chest deep water. And let me tell you, I leave the pool and I get in my car and I feel no pain. So that is how I have dealt with dealing with overtraining, because I've felt it a little bit this year, where I felt like a couple of weeks I skipped that day because I just didn't feel like I needed it. But then 2 weeks later, I really needed it. So it's smart to add those rest days in. So let's get specific though, about your Canadian Special Forces, because I think the folks that are in my audience that might not be familiar with it would be really interested to hear exactly what your training was like.
Yeah, so for my unit specifically, at the time that I did it, we did about a 3-week selection phase, which I won't get into too many details on that, but it's safe to assume that it was a lot of volume, little sleep, and constantly under assessment, constantly under scrutiny.
Yes.
And then it's about a 6-month course where we go through a variety of skill sets: insert, extract, shooting in a CQB environment, or shooting heavy weapons in a direct action environment. We would learn communications skills with the radio and just good communications in a CQB environment. We learned tactical driving, both with Humvees as well as kind of normal smaller vehicles, urban vehicles. What else? Strategic reconnaissance was a key component, and that I think that's usually when they give it to guys again on course, right? You get through the selection phase, you get to do all the fun training. Oh crap, the course is almost over, but now you have to do this really hard, long, exhausting strategic reconnaissance phase.
Okay.
And yeah, so that was broken up into different modules over 6 months, and then like most special operations courses, it culminates in a training exercise to validate the guys'
Right.
abilities that they learned over the previous 6 months at the end.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it's very similar. It's very similar to how our Army Special Forces run things. They have about a 3-week selection program, and that's where most of your attrition is.
Yep.
And then you will have a 6-month Q course, qualification course, basically, that there is still some attrition, but it's usually operational attrition versus physical beatdown attrition, though there are some physical challenges that can obviously build up and cause overuse injury and things like that. So you may see more rollbacks versus actual people quitting or getting kicked out just because of a knee tendonitis or for some reason. They've made it this far. They're fairly well invested into the program, and the Army will work with them. Is that similar to
Yep.
how that 6-month is at your qualification course?
Yeah, very similar.
That's cool. The Navy SEAL side is pretty much a 6-month selection course, or as we like to call it, it's a deselection course, because you put everybody in there and it's a 6-month school. And really, if you were to break it down, those first 4 weeks is the selection. The first 4 weeks of BUDS is nothing but butt kicking and attrition rates every day. And then that culminates with our Hell Week, which is 120 hours straight of training. And then that follows into more. They tend to say, you know, once you make it through Hell Week, the instructors will say, all right, welcome to the training. Now it really starts. And it's still pretty physical. You still have very physical high demands every week that tend to cause injury sometimes, overuse type injuries. But people do get kicked out of that phase if they are failing, if they fail in the dive course or they fail to shoot and land nav, you know, things like that. There are some things that can actually get you kicked out in that rest of the 6-month training course. And then after that, there's SQT, which is a 6-month, and we call that more of a gentleman's course. Probably more like your qualification course, where it actually is the real training. It is more advanced operator training for 6 months, and then you become a SEAL. So it's about a year-long process, you know, from start to finish before you finish. But let's talk a little bit about, like, obviously you had to prepare your body for the rigors of your training. I would assume it's a little bit different than the SEAL side, just because you know, SEAL side is a lot of water side. There's not a whole lot of rucking at BUD/S, but there's a whole lot of carrying boats and carrying logs. So some of the same training can be beneficial to some of the Army requirements with rucking. You know, long rucks, you know, require a good foundation of strength. You know, so you need to be in the weight room. I've seen great runners who can run for days. They put on a backpack, and that is the equalizing factor.
Yep.
They may lap me on the 1.5 miles, you know, in the test, but, you know, put on 50-pound backpack on a 150-pound frame, you know, that can be the straw that breaks the camel's back on that one. On the SEAL side, you know, there's also a big water component, you know, so that's obviously, you know, you have to be comfortable in the water. So for us, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of what you had to do to train. Now, I always tell people, and I'm sure you've heard this as a trainer, when people say, what do I need to do to prepare for this? And our answer is, as trainers, is always is, well, it depends. You know, it depends on a lot of things. And I'll just go run through them real quick. It depends on your athletic history. It depends on your current activity levels. It depends on your strengths, your weaknesses. You know, how are you on the elements of fitness? You know, what's your strength and power? What's your muscle endurance? What's your cardiovascular endurance? How's your swimming? How's your running? How's your rucking? How's your mobility and flexibility? Speed and agility? You know, all of those elements of fitness have really a score to it. And if you're weak in any of them, these selection programs will expose them within the first week, guaranteed.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And I think it's important to note too, like it does depend, right? It does depend, like you said, if you're doing a water-based selection or a ruck-based selection. You know, you can have a big aerobic base, you can have a really well-developed aerobic engine, but if you haven't either done sport-specific training for all the water-based work that you're going to do for a selection like BUD/S, or if you haven't done enough rucking, if you haven't just accumulating enough rucking volume for a selection that's more ruck-based, like the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, doesn't matter. So you could assume that you could excel in one and completely flounder in another.
Oh, absolutely. And if you do that, that's where these training programs or these selection programs will expose what you haven't worked on. Like
Yep.
for me, I was a powerlifting football player. So, and I could swim well because I grew up in Florida and I swam year round just about. But, you know, running long distance at a fast pace, that was my gut check. Every day when we did that, it was my gut check. And I tell people to this day, it's a running man's game, just because that was my weakness. You know, for the running man, and this is funny because I had a good classmate of mine that was a great runner, but he hated the logs and the boats, you know, when we're carrying the boats around. Whereas, I mean, don't get me wrong, I did not like those. I didn't enjoy those, and they weren't easy, but they weren't breaking me. After I left the log, I felt like I'd just left the weight room,
Yep.
whereas there were a couple in our class that were just physically broken, almost like their spine was compressed an extra 2 inches, because of that weight on their shoulders. So, it really does depend. It depends on, where are your weaknesses? Where is your fitness foundation as to how you prescribe workout programs for them? So let's do a couple for instances, some of your, success stories about someone who came in 80 pounds overweight, or someone who came in that was a Olympics caliber runner, or someone who came in that was a powerlifting football player that needed to get endurance. I've seen all three, and they can make it through training. There's just their road to training and through training just may be a little bit different.
Yeah, so I have a really good example. It's kind of ties into it. So he is a Canadian Forces clearance driver. He's training for another selection phase. He's going to be training for GTF2 selection. And he has always had a very hard time in getting his his short distance, middle distance run time down. So we have a 1.5 mile run or a 2.4 kilometer run that I think you need to be under 9.5 minutes for this unit. And it's hard for him. It's hard for him to start getting down under 9 minutes. He's 205 pounds, very strong. He's already passed a selection. He's already done a year-long course that was quite intensive. So he's familiar with the hard work. He's able to get through a tough selection phase. But he's still really concerned. And, even with the programming, it's tough for him because it's not his wheelhouse, right? We could put all our focus into that 1.5 mile run, and we could drop it a lot quicker, and it would come at the expense of everything else for him. And what I reminded him is that myself, so I gave him a personal story. My quickest time in my entire career for that 1.5 mile run was 8 minutes and 57 seconds. It's good. It was good.
Sure. It's a B.
It was a B. There's also guys that could do, all the way down to 7 minutes. I saw some guys do. And there was enough guys that were 8:15 or 8:30. So some really good times, some A's. But what I reminded him is that throughout my entire career, I never got better than 8:57. Yet I still completed 2 deployments to Afghanistan. I still completed 2 of the most difficult courses the Canadian Forces have to offer, Special Forces and Sniper course. And more importantly, I placed 3rd out of 400 competitors in the Petawawa Ironman. And this event is it's 50 kilometers, 38 of which you run with a 40-pound rucksack.
Nice.
That first 32 kilometers I did in just shy of about 6 miles an hour.
Damn.
Yet there was guys that would blow me out of the water in running, whether it was the 1.5 miles or a marathon. They would blow me out of the water. I just couldn't keep up with them in a straight up running competition. But because I had the strength and the structural stability and just the volume accumulation of walking and then jogging and then running with a rucksack, and I did it in a really conscientious way, I was able to throw 40 pounds on my back with boots, pants, and a shirt and just run.
Nice.
Kilometers. And so when I shared that with him, he's like, oh, okay, cool. I get this is just one element of my fitness. And he can just own look, this isn't my wheelhouse.
Right.
You can't have everything in your wheelhouse, and some things you're just going to struggle with naturally. That's just the game you're playing.
Yes.
But as long as you make it to a point where you can play the game, right? And his score isn't going to preclude him from being invited to selection based on all his other, his entire application. And so for him, it's don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So what? That's going to be the tough event for you, and you're still doing fine anyways.
Yeah, I always tell people, to train to compete. You want to compete, and it's just about as many elements as you can, but you're not going to be a competitor in all of the elements. For me, I was a pretty good swimmer, top 10% of the class in swimming. I never won a swim, but my pair and I, we always came in third, second, fourth, somewhere sometimes in that ballpark. Obstacle course, one of the faster obstacle course guys. PT wise, pretty good. Nobody, top 10% again. But running, it was a gut check for me to be in the top 50% of the class with running. And that was I was kind of where you were, right at the 9-minute zone on the 1.5 miles. I did actually become faster after buds and actually drop it down to like 8:20, 8:15. But that's when I was really focusing on that. And it was just more of a challenge because at our team, it was like a real competition, to try to do that. And then I went on to coaching pre-buds programs, when I was still in the Navy, and figured I had to lead by example. So I wanted to be beating the guys. So I spent a good 6 months just focusing on, crushing PT tests, so it was pretty good though. So, and we did that at the Naval Academy. But yeah, I mean, there's always something that you have to work on. There's always something that is part of the gut check. And I think that's the beauty of these programs, because, if you're one of the guys that typically go out for this, typical alpha male, never fail anything, just push yourself hard, you compete and you succeed. That's the type of guys that typically go out for this. But then, I've seen many of those guys, have struggles with failure, have struggles with being mediocre, have struggles with negative feedback that you're constantly getting from your instructors. I mean, being able to handle negative feedback is quite a gift. If you're used to handling being told that, you suck and you're never going to make it, sometimes that's a gift for you. I mean, being given negative feedback, even as a child, not, you don't necessarily need it from your parents that much, but, if you do, there is a strength in it. You can use it as a strength. I typically found it in sports, because in sports, if you don't do something right, you're obviously going to get feedback on what you did wrong.
Right.
Even at my daughter, who teaches, who is a ballet, does ballet, and she's on her toes. She is, no matter how beautiful her 30, whatever 30-second or minute and a half dance is, her dance instructor will correct her on her fingers being, this way or whatever. I mean, there's always negative feedback, and I'm like, that is great. A lesson, being able to handle negative feedback, because you're going to get it. So how about some of the other, let's call it attributes of getting through training? What have you seen? I've seen guys that aren't the best physical specimens making it through, and they just gut check everything. And I tell people all the time, you can't measure someone's heart. You can be the greatest athlete, or you can be one of the worst and still make it through training. I've seen some really good athletes not make it through for just those various reasons. So how about yourself?
Yeah, I think like you said, one is being able to take harsh feedback and not turning it into a personal thing, or ruminating about it. Or when you do find yourself ruminating, knowing how to like release that energy, how to like really embody that and like get that anger out, so that your mind isn't just spinning and spinning and you're trying to move on to the next event and perform on something completely different. So I think that's a huge, huge component of it. Another component, I would say, I would say just the complete lack of another option. Like just knowing down to your core, there is no option. And that's how
Yeah.
it was for me. I was not going back to my old unit.
Yeah.
It served me for a time. I wasn't going back there. And that's really how I thought of it. I was like, well, I mean, this is the next task in front of me and I have to do it, because if I don't, I'm going back there and I'm not going back there.
Right.
So I
That's a
think,
good one. That's a good one.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I think if guys can like really, and it takes a bit. I mean, sometimes it comes naturally. I felt it was kind of natural for me. It was more came from kind of like a fed up place. Like, I'm not dealing with that ever again. But it could also come from a little bit more of a powerful place, like really getting clear as to like, why is it going to be so awesome when you get to the other side of selection? And then even on the other side of your initial training, like what is it about that work that's going to make all this pain worth it? Right? Maybe it's the guys you're going to work with. Maybe
Absolutely.
the training you're going to get to do. Maybe it's getting the big boy rules and not having your handheld through all of your work for the rest of your career. I mean, any of those, just one of any of those reasons can be enough to move guys forward if they get clear enough with themselves as to the difference that would make in their lives.
Yeah. I tell you what, another very powerful one is proving people wrong.
Mm,
Because how many people have told you, oh, you're never going to make that, oh, you'll
yep,
never be that,
yeah,
that's, and once you do, put it back in their face that you did, and then never
yep,
talk to them again because they're jerks.
yeah. It's a
or,
powerful motivator.
or you can thank them. You can thank them. I got through because you told me I couldn't.
Yep.
You
I
know,
think another one too is the ability to after every event perform like a mini after action review, perform a mini
absolutely.
AAR, assess what you did right, own that, like, okay, I did that right, as best as you can guess, right? You're not going to always get told this. Okay, and here's what I felt went right. I'm going to do that again. Here's what went wrong. Here's what I'm not going to do, or what I'm going to change moving forward, and then move on. Because if
Yes.
you keep your brain in the past, into one of your past events, I've watched it. I've seen guys on selection. They go inward, they shut right down. They start you can see themselves. You can see it in their face. Them just beating themselves up about it,
Yep. Yep.
and they're done. They're not
Yeah.
performing anymore. And it's only a matter of time at that point before they just quit and pull pin because why
Yes.
bother at that point?
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that fall apart as well. Another great that you gave me an idea on too is another thing I used to do at the end of the day is I do my full body checkup. Like say what hurts, where 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 is a potential injury coming from? Because I mean these selection courses are all about really beating you up. I mean
Yep.
they really do beat you up physically. And your feet are going to hurt, your shins are going to hurt, your knees are going to hurt, your hips are going to hurt, your lower back's going to hurt, your shoulders are going to hurt. Pretty much if there's a joint in your body, it's probably going to hurt. I mean just
Yep.
because you're just moving them beyond anything that you can even prepare for, right? And it really comes down to your durability and your how much want to you have in your heart. But you can be very smart about it on two things at the end of the day, and that is your fuel. What are you going to eat to prepare for the next day? Because the same stuff is going to happen to you. And then what are you going to do to take care of yourself at the end of the day? Now they're foam rollers. When I went through, there was no such thing as a foam roller. No one knew what myofascial release was or anything like that. There was deep tissue massage, which some of us actually went to. I think I went to twice, while I was going through buds, and I didn't know if it helped or not, but had I done it more often, it probably would have helped a lot more. But that foam roller is the poor man's masseuse. If you don't
Mm,
have one, get one. And I live by it right now. Or a lacrosse ball and find those little spots that are banged up and sore, and see if you can work some of that soreness out before the next day starts, and end your day with a nice easy stretch, nice relaxing cool down of some sort, and then eat well and hydrate and electrolytes, because all of those things are going to make your day the next day better.
yep. Agreed.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
So a little bit of attitude. I tell you what, so we have this one award at SEAL training called the Fire in the Gut Award, and it's really meant for the guy who never failed anything, but never won anything either. He was the guy that literally borderline sucked at everything. you know, he was like next, just above the line where you pass or failed, in the run, or pass or failed in the swim, or he had a specific challenge that just got him every week. Because every week at Bud, you have a 4-mile timed run, you have a 2-mile swim, you have an obstacle course you have to do, you have 3 or 4 beach runs with 3 or 4 PTs, on top of those. Something gets you in one of those things, and there's a gut check somewhere in there for a variety of people. And typically, the Fire in the Gut Award has the gut check on every single one of those. And like all through BUDS, whether it is a physical test, it is an operational test with diving or land nav or whatever, he's just borderline the whole way through. And it is pure guts that he got through. And it's called the Fire in the Gut Award. And, a lot of times those guys, when they come in, they're borderline minimum standard PT tests, right? But they still make it through. And I think they did a study recently on people who came in with the worst PT scores, in the class, have a 6% chance of graduating. Right? 6% chance of graduating with the worst PT scores. Now, those who came in with the highest PT scores actually had like an 85% chance of graduating.
Wow.
So there's some correlation to the PT test, though it is not by far the sole thing that we need to be doing, to get through the training. To get to the training, yes. You got to focus on PT specifics and get good at those scores because let's face it, it's competitive to get to these places. They don't just let anybody in just because you pass the PT test. You have to pass the PT test at a certain standard and beat a certain number of people for you to be able to be accepted, right? That's getting to the training. That's why we always talk about getting to the training with PT test specific. And then now what Wes and I are talking about is getting through the training. And it's a lot more to it than just PT testing training. It's really working on all the elements of fitness. And it's a major point to be mentally ready for this training. I mean, I can't stress it enough how important your attitude and how much you really want this count.
One of the things I recommend some guys do is to actually write. So maybe a month before, a couple months before, where they're feeling really good, they're pumped, they know all the reasons they're going through, whenever they're at their high for why they're going through selection, is they write a letter to themselves that they'll read the day before selection starts. And that letter basically tells them, like, as an order, you are not allowed to make any decisions on this selection phase. Like, you don't have permission to make a decision as to whether this is really what you want, whether you're letting your team down, whether you're just going to fail anyway. You don't get to decide those things on selection. It's what a lot of guys will do, right? They're like, oh, I quit because I was letting my team down, or
right,
I quit because I wasn't doing good enough and I wasn't going to make it anyways. Or, I thought about it and this wasn't really for me. It's like, yeah, of course, selection's not for anybody. I didn't enjoy
yeah,
majority
that
of selection.
sucked.
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't, you have to make sure you do not give yourself permission to make any decision. And it might sound a little bit of like a silly exercise, but guys just, they don't realize how crappy it's going to be until they're on selection. And so giving themselves something like that can help a lot too.
Yeah, that's a really good idea because I never thought of it that way, because I remember going through and kind of making myself that way, so it's like, it's not my choice. I've done everything I can to prepare. Now it's, I'm not quitting. They're going to have to kick me out. I don't meet the standards or I get injured. And pretty much I'm meeting all the standards. Instructors aren't going to kick me out because I am meeting all the standards. I'm doing things right, doing things the right way. Now I'm just praying I don't get injured. Right. So eventually it will evolve from that. All your stress and anxiety about getting to and through the training will eventually evolve to, okay, I'm here. I figured it out. I'm meeting the standards. Now I'm just going to pray I don't get injured. And then lick your wounds every day. Especially the weekend at BUDS, it was nice because we had weekends off. Not sure about your training, but that was a nice time to chill out. It wasn't time to go party and go light it up, on Friday and Saturday night, and then be feeling like crap on Sunday and wondering why you're still feeling like crap on Monday. Right. It's, it's time to, take it seriously and be serious about yourself and your body and push yourself, but at the same time, take care of yourself.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. You gotta, I mean, getting through selection's more than just a PT test. You gotta make sure that, you can be the fittest guy. If you get a selection ending injury, it's over. If you get a
Yeah.
course ending injury, it's over. That's
Yeah.
it. Right? One wrong tweak or one wrong lift, uh, one wrong sprain in your ankle when you're running through the sand, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's important.
Yeah. If you're lucky, you'll get rolled. If you do everything right. I actually got injured 5 weeks before graduation and I just tweaked my knee, and I wasn't going to be able to graduate with my class. I had to graduate with the next class that caught up to me, but it gave me about 6 weeks to recover from that knee injury. And it was a depressing time, but I wasn't kicked out of training. So it wasn't that depressing. I just had to now focus on what was hurting and get that not hurting anymore. And I actually came back faster, which was really good. I left there at like a 28-minute 4-mile run, and then after that about 8 weeks before I was taking them another one, I was down to like 26:30 4-mile timed run. So I actually came back faster and came back stronger. So that's how you treat injuries. If you do get injured and you get the opportunity to stay in the course and be rolled, is actually come back stronger. Don't be sad. You can be sad for a few minutes, but after that, now it's time to get healthy and get serious again. So yeah, you got anything else you want to close with? One more time of like where people can find you.
Yeah, you can head to brotherhoodlife.com. You can check out facebook.com/groups/brotherhoodlife. I got a free Facebook group where I put all my good content. We got a great community there of aspiring, current, and veteran law enforcement and military men. So come join the group and join in on the conversation.
Nice. Wes, hey, thanks a lot for doing this. We'll get it out to all of my audience as well. And so, yeah, I just want to introduce the people that usually listen to me, to Wes Kennedy, former Canadian Special Forces operator, and now runs a great tactical fitness program up in Canada.
Awesome. So happy to be on the show. Thanks so much, Stu.
Hey, thanks a lot, Wes.